as many of you know, there's different parts that go with an arcade stick, and they're not all necessarily made the same. And I kind of wanted to just briefly go over a few differences. I don't want to get too deep into it, but to kind of get you started on what to think about if you're looking to get a stick as far as parts go, just some things to keep in mind and consider. But first, let's do a little history lesson. Parts can mainly be determined, especially in the older age of video games, back when arcades were popular, by their region, mainly that being of like North and South Korea and Japan being your main Asian markets, and then the Americas obviously being North America. Now with that being said, growing up, we probably could have noticed this if we would have paid a little bit more attention, but at the same time, it's also understandable that we might have missed these things. Because obviously when we were going to the arcades as kids, we didn't really care about what kind of grip was on the stick or how the buttons were laid out or made, that kind of thing. We were there because we wanted to play games due to the renovations, the improvements, the stuff that we couldn't play at home. As time went on, obviously arcades are no longer what they used to be. And with that came the improvement of consoles, which caused the arcade market to take a dive. That came with a price if you wanted to play with an arcade stick and have that kind of experience. So obviously that comes with a price, and a lot of it's all based on your parts. So with that being said, let's take a look at the parts, coming at it from the angle of the Asian and American markets, kind of how they've blended together now because you can get them, but knowing that where the roots are, I would like to break them down by buttons and sticks and that kind of thing based on where their origins came from. So first off, let's talk about sticks, which for most of us, when it came to America, at least where I grew up, came in a unit just like this. So I just happen to have my Marvel vs. Capcom 2 unit here, my arcade cabinet, so I'm going to use this as our example. As a part of this, I also kind of want you guys to see the inside of this, so I'm going to pop this top off so I can pull it back, and we can kind of see, if you will, what's under the hood as far as the actual buttons and sticks go. Okay, first off, when we talk about sticks, this here is kind of a dead giveaway of what we grew up with here in America. Japan had a little bit different, and you can see the differences even today as far as their origins go. This full grip is kind of a dead giveaway as to being an Americanized stick. Let me flip this thing open, and the guts in this are quite old, and you're gonna see it's something a little bit different than what you'll see in any stick that you'll get today. Okay, here we go. Come to the back side. Here is where the back of our stick is. This here you're not gonna find nowadays. However, the one thing that I do want to note is that pretty much any style stick that you get now is going to have some form of these on all four sides, up, down, left, and right, unless you've got like a unit like, I don't know, Centipede or Galaxia, something like that, to where it only goes left and right or up and down, or something of that nature. Also to be noted, a lot of times, and we'll see this more when I go to the Japanese, Asian end of sticks, you will notice these gates that are around here. It's important to note that you see basically a transition in the gates between 4-way to 8-way at one point with the American market, and Asia kind of dealt with it a little bit different, but then they eventually did an 8-way gate, but we'll dive into that in a second. Another thing to be noted on these kind of sticks is that that full grip, a lot of people like that simply because, you know, once again, this is what we grew up with. This is normally what we want. This, I'm going to be honest, isn't so good for fight games, and I'll explain why a little bit later in the video. For my Japanese and Asian end of parts, I'm going to use my Mad Catz TE2 because I feel like it's the best example of those type parts, and also because you can open it up a hell of a lot easier. Okay, so the first thing that I want to point out is obviously this is a ball. This isn't a full grip. And this is usually a dead giveaway of a Japanese arcade part, especially if you're looking once again at the older arcade units. The reason I like this a lot better is because that if you actually get a hold of it, it's suggested that you hold it kind of like this, which gives you quicker wrist movement, as opposed to if you are using one of these, you kind of you can still get some wrist movement and all that, but overall, since it is a full grip, the tendency is to grab it full-handedly, and usually that can lead to shit inputs and all that, whereas this here, it's nice and smooth. You get it. Let's open it up. Now, underneath here, this one has a square gate on it, which is indicated by, obviously, that's in the shape of a square. You can get these, and if you do get a stick, I highly recommend get an 8-way if you want smoother transitions. Some people do not mind the 4-way. I happen to be one of those weirdos. Not everybody is like that. These same 4 connectors here that we saw on the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 stick, there's still buttons right there that connect it and all that. And I don't know if you can see it real well. Let's see if we can zoom in. Because some of these, if you look at it, there's the button right there, that little red spot. Let me see if I can get the focus a little bit better. Okay, that little red spot right there in the middle is your button, just like they had on the arcade stick on the Marvel vs. Capcom 2 unit. Some of these actually will have pressurized plates that come across them to give you smoother movement as you're moving the stick to help it click around. Just kind of depends on what stick you get. Just something to think about as you're considering parts on whatever stick that you would consider to get if you are indeed looking to pick up one of these sticks. Also, one of the things that I want to note is that a lot of times this is what's going to be standard on almost any stick that you get. So if you do want a stick like this, keep in mind you might have to dish out money for an extra part. Okay, now let's go ahead and let's move on to buttons. And just like sticks, what we grew up with in America was different from what they grew up with in Japan and how things came across. Now, of course, it's all interwoven, but let me show you kind of a few different things and what to keep in mind when you're buying a stick and what to look for, because certain buttons, believe it or not, come with additional parts. Here's our typical buttons on the Marvel vs. Capcom unit. Right here you can see we've got rounded, we got concave. The normal one right here for America was the concave, from my understanding. Wasn't that we didn't have rounded ones, but predominantly you saw this more often for some reason here in the States. Now, as we get in here on the buttons, one of the things that I want you to notice right off the bat is these are screw-ins, and once again you have kind of the same connector and just the way it comes together and everything. You need to keep in mind that this is here because it has a pressure plate just like the buttons here do. It's got the same thing that leads up into the button. Now, I happen to have an extra one right here. So basically, these you screw in. The nice thing about these is that it doesn't matter what your thickness is. You can put this in about anything that you want. So that's the nice thing. But the thing that you need to consider on this is that when it comes to these buttons, because it has that extra connector, if that goes bad, if this goes bad, you might have to replace more parts somewhere down the line. So it's just something to keep in mind when you're looking. Once again, it sticks. You know, what kind of buttons do you want? If you're making your own, obviously this is going to be a little bit better for you because it's a screw-on, but you might end up having an issue here. So just something to keep in mind. If we come over here to the TE2, you can notice that all these buttons are convex. They're not concave. They are all rounded at the top. None of them have got the indentation whatsoever. And the other thing that I want you to notice is, do you see how close that button is into here and how little movement that has? Take a look at your Americanized one. Got a lot more movement in there. Some people don't like this because of they consider they'll screw up their reaction time or that they won't get what they want in as quick. Take that for what you will. Obviously this is, these buttons are a little bit more standard at this point. And also the other thing that's really nice about these, let's get under here and look at the connectors. Notice that they're not screw-in, they're pop-in. So that's the first thing to keep in mind, is that these things they're set for a certain depth. So if you are looking to make your stick, make sure that you have that to the manufacturer's specs so that it's sitting correctly. The other thing is that you still have some of these connectors down here, but some of the buttons like this nowadays actually will have this built into the button. So if you have to replace it, you're not replacing the whole thing. You're literally just replacing just that button. You can just swap out your button, put in your connectors, and you're good to go. You can pretty much find these all over the damn place. Okay, so that's part one of our stick series. We talked about parts, we talked a little bit about history, kind of what the differences is between them, what to look for, what might work for you, what might not work for you, just different odds and ends just to consider. We didn't dive in too deep because I didn't want to overwhelm you at all. The more important part is that you find something that works for you, and that's what this is all about. Join us next time and we're going to talk about whether or not you should consider getting a stick.